leg. Okay.
Hand.
Let's recap. Last night we were talking about earth pilgrims.
Yeah.
We talked about the image of a pilgrim as a very ancient idea. It predates religion.
Mm-hmm.
There were pilgrims long before there were religions, and the pilgrim can be seen as the biological journey of going through life for all of us. All of us are on a pilgrimage by virtue of being born. Anybody can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
The second aspect of the pilgrimage was many of us feel we're on a spiritual journey while we're alive on earth. And that we're moving through space and time to learn and to evolve. Another aspect of the pilgrim is the story of evolution itself as a pilgrimage, an ongoing development of characters and a story leading to higher evolution. We're all involved in that. Another idea we talked about was the pilgrimage of the solar system through the galaxy. We're all moving. The Earth is moving, the solar system is moving, the galaxy is moving. But then we took the idea a little bit farther, and this is where we started to connect with your work, especially with supernatural. And the idea is that pilgrims have always existed, but the shaman is an archetypal pilgrim because he's moving from this world to other worlds or to an other world. Whether it is a singular world or multiple worlds is something we'll discuss. But what I'd like to ask you to comment on today is that now you've involved yourself in a different stage of your own personal pilgrimage, which began with ancient civilizations and has moved, as we know, into supernatural. How do you see then the idea of earth pilgrim, of a pilgrim on earth related to a shaman, to other dimensions, to the movement between worlds that could in fact be a precursor of our future situation? In other words, we're actually moving to the realms that the shamans are already teaching us about. We're inexorably moving towards them. We're going to end up in that dimension, is how I feel personally.
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear your view on the shaman as pilgrim. The shamanic tradition as a tradition of dimensional pilgrimage, for example.
Well, let's start off. If I look back on my life, I've been traveling all my life since I was 4 years old. I've been traveling to different lands, first with my parents, later when I became an adult, traveling and exploring. I always felt restless. I didn't feel that enough of what I needed to know was right here in front of me.
Me too.
I felt that I had to get out and explore and test my own limits and learn in every way that I could from the experiences and encounters that I had. And a large part of my life as a writer, as a researcher, was spent traveling to far-off lands. And when you go into a new culture that you know nothing about, you're immediately challenged if you're going to function in that culture. And I confronted myself with that kind of challenge again and again in many different cultures. And sometimes I found a culture that I really wanted to explore in greater depth and spend more time journeying in. And what's the whole point of all of this? What's the point of doing any of this? Why not just sit at home? The point was to learn and to grow and to develop and hopefully at the end of the process to be a better, perhaps even a more evolved person than I was at the beginning. What I've discovered as I've gone along is that there's an inward journey that we need to pursue, which is part of the pilgrimage process. And in latter years, the last five or 6 years of my life, when I've encountered visionary plants and the plants that shamans use literally to send their consciousness into other dimensions, other realms, and explore those realms, I've realized that this whole lifetime of traveling the earth has only been a preparation for the journey into other dimensions and other realms. And in order to make that journey, it's essential, it's imperative to enter a deeply altered state of consciousness. because if our state of consciousness is focused on this realm, it's very hard to attend to other realms, and that's what the visionary plants do. They allow us to change the receiver wavelength of our consciousness and tune into another realm. And then as we enter that other realm, curiously enough, many of the challenges and difficulties and learning experiences that we face in this world, traveling to other cultures, you face in that other realm too. It's a totally alien and unknown realm in which you've had no experience whatsoever. You suddenly find yourself plunged into it, and you must make do, and you must survive, and you must hopefully learn from the experience. And I think that's where shamans, and particularly the shamans of tribal and hunter-gatherer cultures who've been doing this all their lives and who descend from a tradition of thousands of years of doing this, really have a lot to teach us in the West. We have almost no experience of other realms. We have great experience of this realm, but almost no experience of other realms, and we have to learn how to find our feet in those realms. But the process is the same. It's a process of learning, of growing, of developing, and of the preparation of oneself. I think the ancient Egyptians called it the perfection of the soul. You're seeking to take a rough-hewn object and gradually in the process of your life to end up perfecting and improving that object as best as you possibly can, so that rather as you might work on a piece of sculpture or a carving or a piece of writing for very long periods of time and finally come to look at it and say, this is as good as it gets, this is as good as I can get it. In a way, that's what you want to do with the whole story of your life, that you're given these 70 or 80 or however many years you're given on this planet, that at the end of it, ideally, you should be able to look back on your life and say, I started out with something rough-formed, but I ended with something that was good and something that had meaning and purpose to it. And I've just come to the conclusion that the inner journey, which in the shamanic context becomes a journey to other realms and other dimensions, is an essential and absolutely vital part of the pilgrimage process. And that if we deny ourselves access to those other realms, for whatever ideological reasons or preconceptions that our society may impose upon us, then we're denying ourselves our birthright as human beings.
Absolutely. The reason I bring up the pilgrim motif at this point in our history is because everything you say is of course true. In our daily lives we have come here to learn, and we've maybe got 80 years or 70 years or whatever. But when we look at the global situation right now, do we really have a whole amount of time to prepare ourselves for what may be very difficult transitions from one stage of our culture to another stage of our culture, where, for example, we might not have the energy that we have now, we might not have the oil that we have now, we might not have the electricity that we have now. We might have to live on a much more moment-to-moment basis, even within 2 or 3 years in the future, who knows? Most of the predictions are not very rosy. We all know that. Sure. We're all aware of the situation here. So the pilgrim stands out as somebody who is very able to adjust to the conditions that exist, however extreme they may be, because he or she has an attitude of moving through a sacred landscape with a sacred sense of purpose, which is to spiritually evolve, to become a better person, to become more integrated with the environment, to become more holistically connected, which is what you've already talked about. And the shaman, in a sense, is the epitome of that, because he goes into completely wild, unexplored territory with only his consciousness as his tool, his guide. How can
it teaches you to master your consciousness?
Yes.
To master the vehicle of your consciousness. This is really what shamans and the whole tradition of shamanism are about. That the nature of reality is much more complex, much deeper, much more scary in a way than it appears if you limit your horizon to the physical realm. And I think that there are huge learning experiences to be had in the exploration of other realms and other dimensions. And see, none of us really knows for sure. Nobody knows. We have our beliefs. We don't know what happens when this physical body dies. And there are those who believe that nothing happens, and who believe that our consciousness is generated by this physical body, and therefore when the physical body dies, the consciousness blinks out like a light being turned off. There are those who believe that, but that's a belief system. It's not a fact, and it's equally valid to say that that your body and your brain are a vehicle for your consciousness.
That the journey does in fact continue.
That the journey continues, and therefore, and you really would like to be as well prepared as possible for the experiences that you are going to have after death. And it seems to me that this is one of the things that shamanism is about. It's about familiarizing you with that other realm that lies just beyond our touch and just beyond our sight in this realm. And certainly that's, if you go back to, for example, the ancient Egyptian religious tradition, their whole concern really was with preparation for the afterlife.
That's right.
This involved intense spiritual journeys, which had to be made so that one could have experiences that would actually prepare you for the mysterious realms that lie beyond life. And that's where ancient Egypt is gone. We may refer to its books, we may refer to its literature, but the living experience of exploration of other realms, who can we turn to in our world today? Only to the shamans, who do that as part of their daily bread. That is part of their everyday life, is the exploration of other realms. And I often feel that we in the West, in the industrialized, the technological countries, are really children by comparison with the shamans. We're taught to believe that our cultures are so superior because of their technology, but incredibly inferior, in my view, in terms of spiritual exploration. And if we really want to be pilgrims in the truest of senses, then we need to listen to what the shamans have to teach us.
That's right. And why is it that we can't listen to them? Is because we originally started off as travelers, aware of the fact that we're spiritual travelers. All of the ancient traditions have the idea of the spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned Egypt, but all of them share that. It is all a spiritual journey. It always has been and always will be. But somehow, in the last 200-300 years of our scientific culture, the idea of location has become very important. The idea of stopping, the idea of owning, and the idea of exploiting all came with the stopping.
Yeah.
As soon as we stop the fluid motion of a pilgrim who's always moving, never stops, there is no end to the journey. It continues and continues and continues. When we stopped, all of our problems seemed to start. And now the entire world is enveloped in this we have stopped mode of operation.
Agreed.
And only the shamans seem to have this fluidity left. Our religions have frozen and fossilized. And even the pilgrimages that exist within our religious traditions, for example, the Camino in France, or even the Buddhist one that I did, are still very pale reminders of what a true pilgrim spirit is all about.
I believe
and in my experience, and as perhaps with yours also, the shamans represent a much more dynamic and courageous leap into the unknown as cosmic pilgrims, as multidimensional pilgrims. And so I think we've both agreed here that we need to learn from them, but there's a huge amount of problems, especially for we Westerners learning from them, because we have decided to stop.
Well, we have to let go. You have to, this is really one of the lessons that shamanism teaches. If you want to explore those other invisible dimensions that surround us, you have to actually let go of this one, and you have to embrace the mystery entirely. And this is where the visionary plants are incredibly helpful allies in that process. I'm not saying that there aren't other ways to let go, but the visionary plants seem to have been provided to us in a process of coevolution, precisely to allow us to let go of this physical realm and to enter deeply into other realms. And I mean, the wonderful thing about shamanic travel, in a sense, is the absolute simplicity of it. The experiences you have may be incredibly complex, and challenging. But to enter into those experiences can be a relatively simple process with the aid of the power plants like ayahuasca, for example. You do not need an airplane, you do not need a motorbike or a motor car, you don't even need a backpack, you don't need any supplies, you need any physical object whatsoever. All you need is to release your consciousness from its captivity to this realm. And immediately it is plunged into a whole other area of experience, which is utterly bewildering and strange and terrifying when first encountered. But if you allow yourself to continue to explore that journey, it becomes more and more familiar, and you begin to be able, what was first a disorienting and terrifying experience becomes a process of experience that allows you again to learn and grow.
And all you need to enter that realm, as you said, is the assistance of the plant and an ability to let go, which is very big. It is very big. It is very hard for people to let go, especially we Westerners who are fixated in being in a space-time location. This is the only place we can operate in.
Yeah.
The shamans do have a lot to teach us about that. And you yourself have been through a lot of very challenging situations over the past few years, suddenly being confronted with this new reality, which I think we have to make very clear is real. It is not a world that is somehow imagination generated. It is a real dimension. It is a real world. It is as real as this world that we're in
I
now.
believe absolutely that the realms of experience into which we enter in shamanic states of consciousness are absolutely real.
Totally.
They are totally real. They are not figments of the imagination. What we're doing is opening up our senses to a wider reality that's always there, that we normally shut ourselves off from. But initially, it can be extremely terrifying and disturbing to enter into these other realms. But this has always been the mission of the pilgrim.
Yeah.